providing the information by 3 p.m. the day before the hearing are in danger of being dropped for April and May. So if you've got a setting in monitoring court, provide the information that is requested and mandated by the operating plan. Again, the judiciary doesn't want to be in a position of dropping things that should not be dropped, but we need the cooperation from the bar to keep things moving. As I'm sure everyone is well aware, the presiding court docket is capped. Our monitoring docket is moving, especially for the non-jury hearings, but we need your cooperation to increase how much we're able to do on any given day. Know that because the jury suspension has been extended for another 2 weeks, all of the settings, the jury trial settings in monitoring court were dropped. The expectation is that you are to confer with the opposing counsel and come up with a new day. If you can't do that, then you're going to have to set a motion to set in the monitoring court and figure out what can be done and where that place can be set. So here again on this slide are what's required in the settings, and we're asking for your cooperation. Next slide, please. From our presiding court, you have received an email if you had a setting that's already been, that you've noticed over the last 7 days, if you had a setting, you received an email from our presiding court email asking for the information that's required in the operating plan. Please respond to that email. Please include the email address for all of the attorneys that are involved, the self-represented litigants that are involved, and help us move forward. So again, things aren't dropped and we can address these virtual hearings more effectively and hopefully increase the number of cases that can set on any given day. If there are questions, if you have concerns, if there are issues, again, keep the lines of communication open, reach out to the presiding court judge. Judge Posa is so responsive. We've got our staff attorney there. She's got her clerk. We are addressing issues as they are raised as quickly as we can. Next slide, please. So this is a sample of a model notice of setting, a sample setting, if you will. Please take a look at it. Please do your best to mirror it. Include the time announcement, include the phone numbers, include the emails. Whether or not there's an interpreter, we've had a case already where there was a Vietnamese interpreter that may have been needed if the parties weren't able to reach an agreement. Please make sure that that's highlighted, you know, especially something other than Spanish. We need to make sure that we have enough time, lead time, to coordinate the availability of those resources. Next slide, please. Some common mistakes that are coming from both the presiding court and the monitoring court assignments. Parties are not submitting the information. I know there's been a lot of grace, there's been a lot of leeway for the last 7 days. As we increase our docket, the leeway and the room for leeway is going to decrease. So please be mindful of that, provide the information. Make sure you confer with opposing counsel. I've had a couple of cases already where there has not been a conference prior to the setting. I'm happy to put y'all in a breakout room. I'm happy to let you talk about the motion to compel, but I can't be available to the next case. And our judges want to make sure that we are serving the bar and the litigants as much as we can. So please be mindful of that. As the dockets increase, the opportunity to confer and take a judge's time while you're conferring are going to be minimized. Also, make sure that you are showing up and that you are responding to the emails from your assigned judge. I had one instance where there was an attorney who didn't respond to the email that I sent out because they were still working on their proposed order. That's 30 minutes, 40 minutes that could have been used on another case, on another assignment. And quite frankly, that was 5 minutes of being dropped. So please make sure, again, that the lines of communication are open. Respond to the email. If you're not ready or if you're still getting things together, reply all so everyone knows what's going on and we're all on the same page. Again, we don't want to have a setting dropped We understand how precious they are, but we need to do our best to keep the docket moving. And again, when in doubt, call the presiding court. There's the phone number. Just let us be in a better position to make sure that we are serving the community and the bar. Next slide, please.
Okay, so just so everybody is aware, the Texas Supreme Court has issued a total of 11 emergency orders so far. Some of those orders have superseded others, some have amended, and some have supplemented. It could take probably about a good 20 minutes for me to go over all of the orders. And so in lieu thereof, I'm just letting you know that there are orders out there. Please go to the Supreme Court's website and pull those orders. Some relate to child possession schedules. Some deal with foreclosures and debt collection and tolling of limitations and deadlines. So you do need to be aware of that because we have seen some of those types of cases come through where deadlines were told or defaults could not be taken. And so we had to drop those cases and have them reset for a later date. Additionally, also just be aware that there are some mandates that have been issued by our governor as well regarding limitations. So make sure to read those executive orders as well. Next slide, please.
Okay, this is me. I'm going to talk a little bit, and I'm also going to speak quickly because we have a bunch of information to get to, but I'm going to talk about preparing for your proceedings and what to do ahead of time with your client and your case. But before I do that, I want to say, I think Steve and I, the lawyers, are here to say what our very nice judges probably aren't saying to you all directly. That's our job. They've put a great deal of work into trying to make our presiding system the most unique system in Texas work during this time period. They've been working after hours and on weekends and practicing and doing all sorts of things. So now it's our turn. We need to make the system work for them. And the way we're going to do that is to look at those 8 things required in the fiat and to do everything in your power to confer with your opposing counsel. And yes, most especially pro ses. Look, they wanted us to do this before COVID happened. We have to make extra efforts to do it now. Everybody, you can find everybody in this county. You can Google, you can use your bar directory, but to whatever extent you can, we've got to pay these judges back for all the work they put in into trying to make the justice system go. I know that when my hearings in March were first canceled and they said call back in May, I was terrified for my clients. And the fact that they've got us online so quickly is nothing short of a miracle. So now it's time for the lawyers to do their part and prepare our clients and our proceedings ahead of time. And so this is the order of how we're going to discuss it: register and download Zoom, adjust settings, prepare your room and office, practice, review the courthouse rules, which most of that we've already been through, and we're going to go over through a little bit more at the end of this presentation, and prepare your client in case. Next slide. In order to go through this a little bit faster, I have already in the group chat uploaded what is approximately a 4-page checklist for you and your clients. Obviously, some of you are very technologically savvy and you're well beyond most of this, which is great. Most of your clients really are not. They've used Zoom for talking to their families or maybe having a happy hour, but they haven't been in this formal type of setting. So you're going to have to do a little bit more to prep your clients ahead of time. Next slide, please. For those of you who haven't seen it, this is kind of what it looks like. Again, I'm still happy to email it. It will be posted on the San Antonio Bar Association website. It's 4 pages that also include links to tutorials, practices, and other information for helping you do some of this pre-hearing work. Next slide. Okay, so again, the checklist is way more detailed, but here are some highlights. First, always download Zoom on as many devices as you possibly can. Your iPhone, your tablets, your iPad, your kid's iPad, your computer, whatever you've got, download the client and always have at least 2 handy. I've seen multiple times, and it's happened to me, where your primary method of using Zoom just isn't working. That's okay. Pick up a new one and keep going. Choose your appropriate account. I think for clients, the free account is going to work. It's important to note that if you have the free account, you're not limited to the 40-minute time. You get to use the functions that our courts have. So you're not going to be limited to 40 minutes during a hearing just because you have the free account. Make sure you let your clients know that. And then prepare your devices and adjust your settings ahead of time. This is something you need to do at night, on the weekends, on your own, just playing around while you're in these Zoom happy hours. Play around with your settings. Next slide. And the previous one. In Zoom, it's also important to note there's two places to go look at settings. One is the administrative settings. That's the photograph on the right of the PowerPoint. Those you can only get to by logging into zoom.us. And the one on the left is what you'll see when you push the little up caret on your mute and video on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Those are the settings you're going to get. I have the arrow pointing to automatically join by computer. I've seen a lot of confusion when people are joining about what sound to use, phone or computer. If you check mark that box and tell your clients to check mark that box, you won't have that pop up at the beginning, and it will leave a little bit of confusion. Next slide.
It's giving us the slides. That's all it is.
Oh, there's a close-up of the automatically join audio by computer when joining meetings. And by the way, whether you go, when you're in Zoom, whether you go to audio settings or video settings, you're still going to get this left-hand menu where you can edit all of those settings: general, video, audio, share screen, virtual background. But the most important one on your checklist that we provided to you, you're going to see a link to the Zoom keyboard shortcuts. I have found those actually really important. Even though there's lots of functionality on the screen, sometimes the screen can get confusing and there's a lot going on. Have those keyboard checklists handy, because when you can't figure out how to change from gallery to speaker view, your keyboard shortcuts will really help you on that. And if you go to settings, the second one from the bottom on the left-hand side, if you forgot to bring those shortcuts with you, you can still go to your settings and find them there under keyboard shortcuts. Next slide. Preparing your room and office. I think probably everyone will tell you who's been having these hearings that connectivity is the biggest problem. Everybody has it. There's nothing you can really do about that during the hearing. Try your best. But prior to the hearing, figure out whether or not you can direct connect to your modem or your router. That's always the best connection. Sound in the room, even when you have a bad connection, can be really distracting. Try and find a quiet room where you can close a door. And I mean, for heaven's sake, do not get in a moving car, especially do not drive while on a Zoom hearing. You might be laughing at home, but it has happened more than once. And don't even be the passenger in a moving car. It is just too loud. Lighting is difficult. It's difficult for me because you want to be in the best room possible, but mostly don't get directly under overhead lighting, and lighting from behind the camera is always best. And yes, I know I am saying that with big windows sitting behind me. And if more than one participant is going to be on, and I've also seen this in hearings where two witnesses are in the same house, they cannot be in the same room or on the same device. It doesn't work well. There's too much feedback. There's too much reverberation. It causes a lot of problems during hearings. So if you have to have two people in the same location on this hearing, then at least put them in separate rooms and on separate devices. Next slide. Turning off your sound notifications. We'll talk about email in a second, but a lot of people aren't realizing that their computers make a lot of noise, not just an email. Your Google, your YouTube, all of your notifications make noise. And my apologies in advance to all the Apple people. You'll have to call Mark Unger. I don't do Apple. This is a Windows based problem solving. Just type in notifications and sounds. On your search function on your computer, you're going to get to this page. And where that red arrow is pointing, you're going to want to deselect allow notifications to play sounds. You can always go back and put them on if you really love those Google notifications or Facebook notifications. But during your hearing, make sure you turn those off. Next slide. And for those of you that don't know yet, this is what your email is going to look like when you go to Outlook. You ask for your options. You go to Mail. It's automatically selected to hit play a sound, and you can see on mine, I've had to deselect that so that you don't get sound played while you're receiving emails during your hearings. I've watched probably 200 hearings in the last few weeks, and that is one of the most distracting things, is to hear all those bings coming in. Not only that, you can hear through these mics people's iPhones or their cell phones vibrating. I can hear when people are calling and texting. And my very first question is, who's texting you in the middle of your hearing? So make sure, even if your phones are on vibrate, they're not on a surface that when somebody's calling or texting you or your client, we're going to be able to notice that. Next slide. Names. Wow. People love their nicknames and their whatever names. And in your defense, and a lot of people's defense, when you first register for Zoom, not knowing what name you're going to register under, that's what's immediately going to pop up. You need to go for a hearing. Please rename yourself, first and last name, legal names. It's too hard to tell who people are if we don't have your real names on your Zoom during your Zoom hearing. Also, I've circled at the bottom of this slide, some people have had a hard time finding this right-hand column where you can rename yourself and use mute on that side. Hit manage participants, or hit participants at the bottom of your Zoom and the chat function. So you have that full functionality on the right, so you can see chat and you can see the participant view while you're in the middle of your hearing. Next slide. Preparing for hearings, practice using Zoom with a witness. Again, I know a lot of us are practicing for fun, but you really have to do that question and answer with your witness. You also have to remind your client of Texas Rules of Evidence 612 and 614. We're still going to invoke the rule. We're still going to be able to use your client's notes if they are reading their notes, even in a Zoom hearing. We can still look at those and have those admitted as evidence. The rules of civil procedure and evidence have not gone away. We're going to see an example of some questions that you can ask witnesses a little bit later on. But make sure your witnesses know that the rule has been invoked. We have gotten lots of questions. What if they cheat? What if somebody's watching? And we get it, and this is hard on everyone. People cheated before, they're going to cheat now, and we know that. But it's still our duty, the lawyer's duty, to remind the clients that if for some reason we find out that your mother is watching this hearing from Houston, they won't be allowed to testify at this hearing or possibly any future hearings. Also in Bexar County, I know it's different in some other counties, but we're still doing courthouse attire. Lawyers are expected to wear suits and professional attire, and clients are expected to be reminded to wear church clothes or business clothes. Steve is going to talk a little bit more about the details of preparing your file. But one thing especially, and I'm going to talk about our family lawyers, because we're the ones that kind of sometimes have to get in there on 2 or 3 days notice. And I know that in the temporary hearings can be hard. But now we have to share those exhibits and confer on them with opposing counsel ahead of time. You have to pre-mark your exhibits. You have to share them with opposing counsel and agree where you can on which ones are going to be admitted. There in the checklist, you're going to see instructions for creating digital exhibit markers. It's pretty technical. Other ways to do it is to put a sticker on your exhibit and scan it. There are free phone scanners that you can find all over. The other thing is, push comes to shove, just type it in through Adobe. Even free Adobe will allow you to type on a PDF exhibit. Next slide. Judge Alvarez and Judge Alvarado already talked about the fiat that needs to be filled out. That is a prerequisite before any hearing. And again, I'm going to stress it again because I can't enough. For those of us, all of us who had trouble conferring ahead of time because we have a lot of clients and we have a lot of cases, I'm sorry, that's just going to have to change. We have to confer on all these things ahead of time, because then you may not be able to have your hearing. And so even though it's going to take longer to get to our hearings, your clients are going to be more upset that they didn't get it on the day that they thought they were, because we just didn't confer on our fiats. Next slide. Again, Steve's going to talk about this a little bit more, but prepare your folder ahead of time, knowing that it's going to be shared with the judge. They're going to vary, as Judge Alvarado and Judge Alvarez were talking, from judge to judge. You're going to get your email in the morning about how they would prefer to receive their files. But for the most part, the 3 files you're definitely going to want to have are pleadings, exhibits not admitted, and exhibits admitted. To the extent that you've agreed on certain exhibits, those can go in the folder for exhibits admitted. And be sure to name them in a way that's easy to find. Every exhibit should be named plaintiff or petitioner's number 1 dash the name of the file, 2019 tax return or police report. You should name your exhibits in your pleadings so that any stranger could walk in, open your file, and know exactly where to find your pleadings and your exhibits. Next slide. This is an example of how your file should look when you're getting ready to have a hearing. Really simple, 3 little files. That way they're easy to transfer to a judge's Google Drive or whatever method that they're going to ask you to share your documents. Next slide. The judges have already touched on this and you'll see a little bit more, but in the last few weeks of Zoom hearings, these are the most common mistakes that we're seeing. I hope that I've gone over a little bit of how to avoid mistake number 1, Zoom not properly set up. That checklist should be a lot of help to you and your clients. Your hearing space, making sure all of that's prepared in advance. And I do say this in the checklist, remove offensive things from the background and tell your client to as well. If you are debating, I don't know whether or not this is offensive, it is, take it down. Making sure your witness is prepared, practicing with the questions, and making sure, again, we've said it 10 times, so by now you know how important it is, conferring with your opposing counsel ahead of time. Next slide. I'm going to toss it over to Steve.
Okay, so this section is designed to give you some instructions on, I'm going to have a hearing in the next day or so. What should I be expecting and what do I need to be preparing so that I can efficiently jump into a virtual courtroom? Number 1, a day or 2 before the hearing, you should be conferring with your opposing side. You've got to connect with them. You have got to figure out a world, how do we best organize and streamline our exhibits, our arguments, so that once we jump into a virtual courtroom, the judge will have a presentation, an electronic presentation that will streamline the process. Because remember, we've got a world where Judge Posa, who's working late at night and early in the morning trying to get cases out, with a system where you have judges receiving the instructions from Judge Posa, they're trying to efficiently get through a system, make their rulings, and then report back to Judge Posa and say, I'm ready for the next proceeding. So the better, from the attorney side, the better that we can be organized, the more efficient the system can be for presiding and for the individual judges. Next slide, please. So in conferring, the areas, you're going to talk about your exhibits. You're going to talk about things like, we announced an hour, do we need an hour? In some instances, someone may have a technological limitation that says, I can't do this or can't do that. It's better to find that out the day before or 2 days before than in the middle of your hearing. And then what we have seen is really slowing down a process within the virtual hearing are exhibits. So the more you can confer on exhibits, the more you can agree to, the more you can streamline where your issues are, the better things will be at the end of the day. Next slide. So you've conferred and now you're going to have a hearing the following day. You should expect and should be monitoring your emails either the night before or the day of, and you will get an email from the district court judge that has been assigned your case. So you will get that the night before, the day of, and you should be watching presiding court through the live stream Zoom or YouTube links. If Judge Posa or presiding judge goes through the docket and you did not hear your case called, you should call presiding court and mention to the court, I've got a setting and I wasn't called. So you'll receive your email from the district judge that has been assigned your case. And the district judge then will send you instructions via email on what they want you to do, the instructions to follow in order to set up their virtual courtrooms. So each judge sits a little bit differently. Each judge has a little bit different email instruction piece that they'll send to the litigants. They all contain generally the same information, but each one has a particular feature. So make sure, just because you were in front of Judge Alvarado on day one, If Judge Diaz is your judge for the following day, please read those instructions separately. So let's go to an example of what you may receive. Next slide, please. So here's an example of Judge Alvarado's email that you would receive if presiding court had assigned your case to her court. She'll give you instructions on the Google Share Drive. She'll give you instructions on where to place certain exhibits. She'll give you instructions on how to join the Zoom meeting. And all that information will get you what you need to properly set up and join ultimately the virtual courtroom. There's another exemplar that I have in the presentation from Judge Diaz. You'll see she has a very similar, next slide please, she has a very similar instruction set. And but just pay attention because each judge has their own preferences, so pay attention to the details. So in your conference, you will have prepared, or pre-conference, you will have prepared all your files. You will now jump into the Google Drives. You will email or Google Drive the information as per the instructions. And then you will, once you're into the Zoom meeting, you'll have to wait until the host, the court, lets you in. So sometimes it takes a little bit of doing as everything gets organized, but if you'll wait patiently, once everybody is in the rooms, then the court will admit you into the room. And what we found, if everybody jumps into the room with the mute button triggered, it saves a lot of disruption at the beginning of the hearing. So next slide, please. So what happens is, here's a couple examples of maybe how you and your team can make things a little bit more organized for the district judge that you're in front of. They just give you instructions on put files in a Google Drive or email me the files. Here's two quick recommendations that maybe will help organize and create kind of a virtual notebook for the court. And I would recommend in your conference before the hearing, if you do this jointly with opposing counsel, it would be great for the judge that you're in front of. So one example, next slide, is a Word document. And if you go to YouTube and plug in, for example, how to embed a PDF into a Word document, you can find a bunch of tutorials. It's very simple. So you can actually place a PDF onto a Word document, and then you would share that document with the court, and the judge just has to double click that PDF on a Word document, and it's all nicely organized in a table of contents. So that's one way to maybe help the judge organize things. Another example, if we go to the next slide, is combining Adobe PDFs. So you combine them, and then if you look to the left of the screen there, you can create bookmarks. And all the judge has to do then is to click the bookmark on the side, and it'll pull up that part of the live pleadings or whatever you need the court to see at that time. So if you do those things, I think that it would help tremendously organize the virtual hearing room and allow those proceedings to get through a little more efficiently so the district judge can get back to presiding court and get to the next hearing. Next slide.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Steve. All right. So the next part is going to be conducting proceedings, and this is going to be the judge's perspectives. We're also going to have some good representative examples to show you of hearings passed already. So we'll be covering the topics of calling witnesses, dealing with the breakout rooms and how those have been actually very helpful in getting cases resolved, walking you through admitting evidence in the virtual world, Zoom screen sharing, as well as some of the pitfalls that are associated with that, making sure that you're tending to the record and being cognizant of our court reporters that are also attending the courtrooms by way of Zoom. And then also managing hearing disruption. So if we could turn to the next slide, please. Okay, so just be aware that when calling witnesses, you may have to have some unique and new lines of questioning. So we've got a great example that you will be seeing shortly regarding that. You might want to ask questions such as who's there with you? Where are you zooming in from? Why is there a virtual background? Can we see what's behind you? You know, what has been provided to you to refer from when giving your testimony? Has anybody been contacting you during your testimony? Maybe if they were in the waiting room as a witness, anybody contact them there? Were they reviewing any documents while they were in the waiting room? So those are the type of questions that you need to consider in operating in this virtual new world. Additionally, make sure that you invoke the rule. Again, I think Crystal had mentioned about cheating. This is one of those ways that you can help prevent that. You have to make sure that you educate your clients and your witnesses very well on what that means. Talk to them about the rule of exclusion. Make sure that they understand that they are not to observe the proceedings from any other format. For instance, like a live stream or a call-in telephone access number or something to that effect. Also, make sure that you admonish them on using the private chat feature. That's another way of violating the rule. So just be aware of that, be cognizant of those features, and try to train yourself on those matters. There are plenty of Zoom tutorials out there that you can look to on those specific features with respect to chat. Additionally, interpreters, we talked earlier about interpreters. Make sure that if you have an interpreter that is outside the Spanish speaking language, that you contact the Civil District Court Administration at 210-335-2300. Please contact them at least 2 days ahead of time so that they can make a special arrangement for the type of language that you're needing assistance with. Also be aware that Zoom does have an interpreter feature. And learn those features through the Zoom training. But at the end of the day, let's see here. The main interpreter will be the interpreter that we use through our civil district courts. Okay, the next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Judge. I'm going to briefly go over the break room option. If you haven't had a chance to play around with Zoom yet, there is a feature that allows you to be placed in a break room where you can confer with opposing counsel, you can confer with your client, you could have the equivalent of a chambers conference with the judge and counsel, as well as a conference with the child in chambers through this break room feature. The judge has to create it, or the host of the meeting has to create the break room, has to invite you into the break room as well. When you're prepared to leave the break room, be sure that you do not choose leave the break room and instead that you choose return to main session. If you choose leave, you will be kicked out of the proceeding entirely and will have to log back on, but that can be a very useful feature. Admitting evidence. I know what we're trying to do is mimic everything as closely as we could to having physical court. And so think of it that way. You're going to walk and talk your evidence through. You're going to be on the record. So you're going to want to be able to identify your exhibit by what it's been pre-marked as, assuming you've pre-marked it. And also for ease of everyone involved, you'll want to identify the exhibit based on what it's titled in the email that you sent the exhibit in, or in the shared drive where it's saved, so that everyone involved can easily locate that exhibit. There'll be an outline that will be provided to you all with further examples on what to do if exhibits have been pre-exchanged versus if they haven't been exchanged previously, and we'll see a little sample of that later on in this presentation. Once you identify the exhibit, lay the predicate. Hopefully you've conferred with opposing counsel and you've been able to agree on certain exhibits being admitted, and you can go ahead and just move for those to be admitted. If not, you'll need to allow opposing counsel an opportunity to object. If the exhibits haven't been exchanged, you'll have to exchange those exhibits with opposing counsel to allow them an opportunity to review them. That can be done by email, by shared drive. There's also the chat feature that I see a lot of you are using right now. You may notice within that chat feature, there's a little icon in the bottom right that says file. That's also a useful way to exchange links to like a shared drive, but it's not recommended because anyone that's in that chat can download the document and then have it for their own keeping. So we recommend that you use email or shared drive instead. And then lastly, on the issue of admitting exhibits is just, I know this was addressed earlier, but make sure that you're holding on to all of the originals. And I hear a little feedback. If everyone could please make sure that you're muted Hold on to all of the originals, and then each court will be different. The court reporter will indicate to you if those need to be mailed in or not. And if you guys could please mute yourselves, I would appreciate that. Okay. And up next, I believe Judge Alvarado, are you covering this, or Judge Alvarez is covering the screen share feature?
Yes, thank you, Judge Diaz. So just really quickly, and again, please mute yourself. If you're unmuted, mute yourself. So the Zoom screen feature is helpful. It's a good way to enhance your presentation to the court and also help your witness, even though they're removed from you, walk through the exhibits. So know that that is available. Play with it, practice with it. It is an enhancement to your presentation. Something that to be leery of, though, is to make sure that when you're sharing exhibits, that they don't have confidential information, that there's not an unintentional sharing of data that should not be shared. Recognize that people can capture the screen even though they're not supposed to. So be mindful of that when you're dealing with medical information, social security information, etc. There is also an annotation feature. If you do, when you're sharing your screen, you do options, you can annotate. So that's helpful if you're trying to get a witness to talk through something that happened or talk through where they were, if it's a map or if it's a picture of whatever they're testifying about. But it is problematic in that you have to make sure that you can control who is annotating on your share screen. That is one of the ways that you could be Zoom bombed. I think everybody saw a little bit of that with the PowerPoint presentation as we were first getting started. So know that there is a enhancement, or I guess it's easier to share PDF versus a Word. It comes out a little bit better, a little bit clearer, a little sharper, and it's easier to control. So please be mindful of that. Next slide, please. This is the minding your record. So Judge Alvarado mentioned that the presiding court docket is not interactive, right? We're getting the assignments made before the night before, the day of, and Judge Pose is just calling the docket and giving the assignments. The monitoring docket is interactive. And so again, just as we've been saying throughout the course of this training, please mute yourself. When you appear for the docket call, the background noise, it's a distraction. It's not good for the record if the court reporter, who is also remote, can't hear what's being said. Please speak slowly, which I'm not doing. I apologize. When you're making objections, there is a compilation that Judge Diaz has put together. It's on the chat and it'll be on the SABA website. Different courts have different preferences of how you make the objections. So take a look at that, but make sure that you remember that there is a lag. There's a little bit of lag that Zoom microphone will catch you. So if you are going to make an objection and interrupt the question or the answer, a visual cue is not, it's advisable. It's helpful to just make sure that people are appreciating that you're about to make an objection. So also keep track of the exhibits, what's admitted, what's offered. And again, as officers of the court, I am asking, and I think all of our judges are asking, that you help the court reporter maintain the integrity of the record. If the exhibits are not withdrawn, make sure you appreciate and understand how that particular court reporter wants you to get those records, or excuse me, those exhibits with the record. The chat is not a substitution for the record. So something that's come up before, if you want to correct opposing counsel, but you don't want to interrupt them. For example, they're referencing petitioner's exhibit 1 instead of defendant's exhibit 1, and you put a little note on the chat, hey, you're actually talking about defendant's exhibit 1. Make sure you actually state that on the record, because the chat is not the record. It's not a substitution for the record. And if you want your record to be clear, please be mindful of that. Also be mindful of the attorneys. If there's more than one man, if there's more than one sir, more than one ma'am. So just maybe reference people by name, so that way your record is as clear as it can be. And it's come up a couple of times. Make sure the court reporter doesn't get disconnected. So be helpful to the court with extra eyes. If you notice the court reporter's box is missing from the hearing, you're not on the record. Most judges are not recording the Zoom, using the Zoom feature to record. The official recording is coming from the court reporter. So everybody everybody should be looking out and make sure the court reporter's box is there, she's live, and he or she is taking down the record. So that's that for that slide. Thank you. Next slide, next presenter.
Okay, this is me. So we have up 3 quick clips from some of our mock hearings that we conducted as we were trying to prepare ourselves for the first clip is an example of a situation where an exhibit was exchanged prior to the proceeding, but then a change had to be made to the exhibit on the spot. And so I'll go ahead and play that so that you can watch that.
All right, folks, we're working on the audio.
Only one change.
I'm sorry, I can hear it clearly, but can no one else hear it clearly right now? Nope. Well, I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what the issue is, but this is a perfect example of what happens in the middle of proceedings. So we'll have this PowerPoint available to all of you so you can take some time. And since we are a little bit over anyways, I'm going to skip through the videos. Next, let's see. Audio is bad again. I'm getting some notices of that. Okay. Well, I think I'm can ask one of the other judges to cover my presentation. Judge Alvarez or Judge Alvarado, can you pick it up from here?
Can I add real fast, judges? The clips that you're about to see were part of our mock trial, and it was an example of what to do if your exhibit changed from the time that you offered it to opposing counsel. They looked at it and gave it to the judge. And as our clients sometimes do, they wanted to make a change to the exhibit, and the attorneys handled it really well. Nobody got flustered or upset or argued. They just said, hey, can you, Jason Becerra said to Amy Geiswhite, can you just email me the changed version so I can look at it quickly? Amy did. Jason looked at it. It was agreed. It was approved. It happened in the course of 30 seconds. So even if the exhibits haven't gone your way, just take a beat, take a breath, and figure out problem-solving ways to work with your opposing counsel to get your exhibit admitted.
Thank you, Crystal.
Have you prepared a?
I'm going to try playing this clip again. If you can nod or shake your head if you can or cannot hear it, please. This second clip is an example of some excellent questions that Jason Becerra incorporated into his mock trial that we recommend you all consider asking questions like this in your proceedings regarding the background. And let me just go ahead and try to play it so that you can.
Notice that you're using a virtual background in Zoom. Where are you?
I'm in my study.
Could you please turn off your virtual background so I can see whether or not anybody's watching or anything else? I've also noticed that you keep on looking over to your right. Do you have a secondary screen on your computer?
I do not.
You do not. Okay. Or do you have any papers in front of you, sir?
I do not. Yeah, on the desk, I do, certainly.
And are any of those documents notes that your lawyer has provided to you or anything like that?
I have an expense sheet and I have a tax return.
Okay. Did you make notes of any meetings that you had with your attorney that you are currently looking at or currently utilizing while this hearing is transpiring?
I'm not.
Okay, great. And then the last clip that we have, just to show you an example, this is a clip where I accidentally Zoom bombed the mock trial proceeding with Judge Alvarado. And we'll just play that really quick so you can see how that was handled.
There was a total household income of $9,600, right?
Yes.
And so as far as expenses are concerned, who's doing that? Okay.
Did somebody, oh, hold on for a second.
No, Your Honor, that was not me. I don't know who did that.
That was me, I'm sorry.
Could you please identify yourself for the record?
It's Judge Diaz, I'm sorry.
So it happens to all of us. We all make those mistakes. That's how I learned that anyone could Zoom bomb anyone else's screen. There is an ability to turn off. I saw a question on that in the chat. You can turn off the annotation feature before you share a screen to avoid things like that happening.
There was a.
Okay, and then hearing disruptions, I've gotten some questions about that. What happens if people are being disruptive? We're inviting the public to participate in these proceedings. And it's just like in the regular courtroom, it may require us to take a break, to reset. It may require individuals to be kicked out of the proceedings or to be placed in a waiting room. So those will be addressed just like they would normally be addressed in the courtroom.
Okay, and so also we have to comply with the constitutional open courts requirements. Courts across Texas and here within our presiding system, they're all doing it a little bit differently. We list each morning on our Bexar County Civil District Court's website page the court's means of doing their open courts during this pandemic. And we have about 3 variations that have evolved out of our presiding court system. Some are live streaming to YouTube. Those links are posted on the Bexar County website. Some are requiring that the person that's wishing to view the hearing call in for a telephone access phone number and code or the Zoom access number so that they can come into the Zoom virtual courtroom. And then others are live streaming the virtual courts hearings on televisions into their courtrooms. And so that's how we are trying to comply with the open courts requirements. Next slide, please.
This is my slide. I know that there's been a lot of news about security concerns. For those of you who don't know, the court's accounts are set up by the Office of Court Administration. David Slayton was on here earlier, who runs that office. And these are accounts specifically administered by them and protected by them. The Office of Court Administration has confirmed that none of the servers that Zoom is using for OCA accounts, and I think honestly all accounts are in China. That was a concern that a lot of people have raised. These Zoom accounts do have end-to-end encryption and also the ability to require a password to get in all meetings, which I believe most of our judges are doing. So these are safe hearings. If you get a meeting ID from Judge Diaz on Monday, she's not going to be using the same one Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So you won't be able to get back into that meeting, or strangers won't be able to get back into that meeting once that meeting ID and code have been used. And Zoom is constantly updating their security options. And so every time you get that little message to update your Zoom client, please do so you can have the latest secured client.
Okay, and I promised you guys we're almost done. Just going to go over a few common mistakes that we have seen when folks are conducting proceedings. One of them is parties not conferring until the time of the hearing, which, as we mentioned, we're all very limited on time, so we would appreciate that you do that, please. Counsel not conferring on exhibits prior to the proceeding, making unnecessary objections. So again, no different from real life. We don't appreciate that in the virtual courtroom either. And then making sure that you confer on proposed orders. Please try to incorporate changes into one proposed order for the court. If there is an inmate in your hearing that needs to be included, please make sure that you confer with the staff attorney's office so that they can set all of that up just like they would do prior to this new world that we're living in. Also be aware that sending mail to inmates with notices, etc., could be problematic due to some of the delays that we're seeing across the board. And then lastly, counsel unilaterally annotating exhibits, especially after they've been admitted. Please do not do that, just as you would not write all over an exhibit after it were admitted in the physical courthouse. Please don't do that in the virtual courtroom either. And then there's a few things to cover post proceedings. We've already talked about exhibits pretty extensively. You'll need to save them to submit to the court reporter. Please keep track of them as you go. Not only do you need to keep track of exhibits that were admitted versus exhibits that were offered but not admitted. If you have a hearing that is more than 1 day long, our court reporters need you to make sure that you're keeping track of the day the exhibit is offered, not the day that it's admitted. So when you submit those exhibits to the court reporter, they're going to need to have them labeled somehow by the date that they were offered, and then those that were admitted versus those that were offered but not admitted. You may be able to do that through the court's shared drive throughout the course of the proceedings if you can do that. If not, then I would recommend maybe asking your judge at the end of the proceedings if you can all have a few minutes to go over and make sure everyone's in agreement on those exhibits that were admitted versus those that were not and what needs to be submitted to the court reporter. If you need copies, certified or conformed copies, you can mail or e-file a letter requesting copies, which you could always do. If you are requesting them by mail, please call the number we provided there, 335-2661, so that you can get a page count and a cost in order to know how much to send via money order or check. If you are e-filing a letter, you should include the cause number, the email address to send copies to, and the clerk will charge the account on file. And it's all the same process for certified copies, with postage being charged to your account. Whoops. Lastly, obtaining a transcript, business as usual, no difference. You're going to contact the court reporter for that particular court. I saw a question in the chat about that. We will have court reporters on the Zoom conferences with us if a record is requested. There's a quick reference guide that I dropped in the chat and will also be providing to you all later that talks about what judges do with respect to the record, how they prefer exhibits be submitted to them, and all sorts of goodies. So we will make sure that you guys have all of that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our presentation. We're sorry that we went a little bit over and started a little bit late, but I wanted to, number one, remind you all that all the materials will be provided to you, including the PowerPoint and a more detailed outline that's going to have hyperlinks to all sorts of things, tutorials, and different things that can help you. We really recommend, I know this was a lot packed in a short amount of time. We recommend that you all take some time to go over those materials. It really has almost everything you need to know to be able to successfully prepare for and conduct these proceedings. And I promise they are not as complicated or as hard as they seem. This may seem overwhelming right now, but once you start trying it, the reaction we've gotten from our local bar is that it's really not that bad. So thank you guys for taking the time. Thank you to my fellow panelists. We threw this presentation together in about a week, and I'm pretty proud of the work that we did, and I hope that it was beneficial to you all. All the questions that have been asked in the chat, we again are going to make sure that we answer every single one of those questions, and we want to do a little follow-up question and answer session that we'll record for you guys, and we'll publish that as well. So you will have answers to all of those questions in the chat. Thank you very much. Anything else from any of my panelists? No?
Other than thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the nice comments in the group chat. We're looking forward to trying to answer all those questions again. Thank you especially to Ms. Thompson and Mr. Chiscano, because while we were navigating, trying to do our online hearings, they were in the background sending emails and doing Dropbox links and share drive links and uploads of new PowerPoint presentations as we all annotated them and worked on them. So I want to give a lot of credit to them in the formulation of this presentation, because they worked very, very hard to help us look good.
Yes.
Absolutely. And Judge Diaz, thank you for bringing us all together. The organization is amazing. And so do look out for those resources on the SABA website. And if you didn't capture them off the chat, they are helpful. I even found them helpful. So thank you all so much for being here. Judge Diaz, thank you for getting us together. And of course, Crystal and Steve, y'all are amazing. Judge Alvarado, thank you so much.
Can't wait to see y'all again.
Good luck, everyone.